Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more interesting stories like these. Now, let's get into today's story video. AITA for pouring my husband's sweet tea down the drain and marching out. COVID prompted me to quit my part-time work, and as a result, I've essentially turned into a stay-at-home parent for the last year and a half. Due to the fact that this has always been my position in my relationship, it is just easier for me to keep up with the current pace. I'm not bothered by it in the least. As a side note, I'm also pursuing a nursing degree, although from the comfort of my own home. My spouse works full-time and for long periods of time, which is the usual for him. Each trip, his drive to and from work takes around 1 hour. We agreed to meet 20 minutes away from our house since I know that jogging gives him a lot of stress, and I don't want him to have to travel back and forth between our house and the meeting location. When he's 20 minutes away, he calls me, and I quickly go for the airport. Due to the fact that I had to turn out all of the lights in the home and gather my belongings before I could leave the house, I was 7 minutes late today. His attitude toward me when I came was really nasty since I had been late. He wouldn't even try to have a conversation with me on the phone. Owing to the fact that I arrived 7 minutes late, even though I tried my best to explain to him that I needed to put on my shoes and turn out the lights, he remained uninterested. The run had been uncomfortable, and when we arrived home, he stated that he had every right to be angry and rushed up to the second story of the house, where we found him. Because he's always expected me to be there at his beck and call, I've harbored a tremendous lot of resentment against him for many years. Ever since I lost my job, he seems to believe that the whole world revolves around him and his work schedule. I get a second cry out of him every time he is hungry or thirsty. Not only that, but he is no longer even serving his own plates anymore either. Apparently, the only thing I do is sit in the dark with my hands folded, waiting for him to approach me, which is according to his view. At this moment, I realized he was acting foolishly, and I grew so upset that I did something that would land me in jail. He headed downstairs, and I informed him that he could prepare his own meal and lunch for the next day at his place of employment. The pitcher of sweet tea I prepare for him every week went into the sink, and I exclaimed, "You can make your own sweet tea, you ungrateful brat," as I dumped it into the sink. After that, I stepped out the door and into my vehicle to go to my mother's home in the neighborhood. In that case, what do you think of Ada's overreaction? At the moment, I was merely upset by the situation. Update. As of this writing, it's been a couple of days since my first post. Each and every person was very friendly, helpful, and encouraging. I've gotten a plethora of messages, and I'd want to express my gratitude to each and every one of you. More than you can possibly realize, they meant a great deal to me. As a result, I've decided to divorce my husband. Moreover, it wasn't about a single occurrence, but rather a succession of events. Before I made the peace, I wasn't completely uninformed of what he was up to in terms of controlling the situation. As bizarre as it may seem, there are times when I forget I'm an adult and don't have to say yes, sir, or pay attention to any men who are much older than me. I've achieved the legal age of majority in my country. All of my regulations are entirely up to me. I'm embarrassed to confess it, but I've come to realize that I had been thinking of him more as a father figure than as a business partner. Even typing that makes my stomach churn. Yet that is exactly what is going on here. Right now, I don't want to assess it since it's too unpleasant to do so. Right now, I'm having a very tough time grieving my loss. I'm feeling like a complete and total failure. Even worse, he seems to be entirely disinterested. When I called to let him know I was leaving, he answered the phone, "That's all right. When you are ready to pick up your stuff, please notify me so that we can have you moved out as quickly as possible." That was the end of the conversation. The last thing he said on the phone before hanging up was, "I'm sorry." I'm in agonizing discomfort. I loved him, and I believe a part of me just wanted to see whether he would stand up for me and accept responsibility for his actions. He wasn't, and that's the end of it. However, despite the fact that I'm in agony, I feel emancipated. My mother has greeted me with open arms, and she is pleased that I am ending my relationship with him. I gathered with my friends, whom he refused to let me see because he was worried about me. I sat in on shows that he said were too juvenile for me to watch at the time, and I've begun to dress in ugly sweatpants and big t-shirts, which he believes make me look like a male, despite my protests. So, thank you very much to everyone for your assistance. I got a much-needed jolt in the morning. I'm not even interested in becoming a stay-at-home parent. That is not something I would ever desire for myself. No hate on anyone who does. Honestly, guys, it was hard and lonely work. I want to get my RN certification and then pursue a master's degree in nursing. You've all been some of the most upbeat folks I've ever encountered. Story 2. Ada for accidentally sleeping on the couch with my husband. My husband, a 24-year-old man, and I are in town to see my family. My parents started acting suspiciously as my husband, children, and I were about to retire for the night. I was a little concerned. Something didn't seem quite right to me at the time. I asked my mother what was wrong, and she quietly advised that my husband sleep on the couch in the living room, which I agreed with. I was taken aback because what was the reason? According to my mother, my father is not at peace. I described her and my father as weird, and I recommended my husband to stay away from them. I was getting ready to sleep when my mother barged into the room as we were changing and told us that she didn't want us in the same room alone in her house. Due to the fact that he was in the middle of changing, my husband is terrified at this point, and he walks to the couch, where my mother apologizes but says she is not in the mood to cope with my father's nagging all night. My younger sister, 21F, and her husband have slept in the same room at their house multiple times, and she has never brought it up, and she responds with, "Well, your husband is white, therefore your father feels uncomfortable." I was through with it, so I said fine to continuing. The next morning, when I awakened at 4 a.m. to take a glass of water, I saw my husband fully awake and lying on the couch. In response to his assertion that the couch is as uncomfortable as, I sat down next to him, and we both fell asleep by accident. My mother was in a state of worry when I awakened later that morning, so she didn't wake up my father with her yelling. She questioned if we were so reliant on one another that we couldn't spend a single night away from each other. Even when I tried to explain that it was an error on my part, she proceeded to be disrespectful and accused me of being self-centered, among other things. I was in a bad mood, but my son called, and we were able to conclude our conversation. My thoughts are turning to whether I really am the bad guy in this situation. My mother accuses me of being self-centered, thoughtless, and completely oblivious to how horrible her life would have been if my father had discovered our presence in the house. My whole argument is that it was an accident, that I'm 24, that my father is peculiar, and that my sister's husband is under no need to do anything, so why should I be required to? Ada. Edit. My ancestors are from South Asia, as is my family. Edit 2. Yes, I am aware that a lot of this is due to the fact that my husband is white and that they are racist and towards him. It was because of what they were doing that I referred to them as odd, strange, and awkward, glaring at each other, swearing at each other under their breaths, randomly going quiet out of nowhere, etc. They do this on a regular basis and have done so for as long as I can remember, which is a long time. So much so that my sister and I have coined the term weird mood to describe it. For example, keep an eye out for mom and dad. They're in a peculiar mood, might be appropriate. Please accept my apologies for the excessive amount of changes, but this should be the last one. I'm getting a lot of queries about the same topic, so I'll just copy and paste one of my previous comments here. I had no reason to believe my children were in danger. As a result, we were more than 8 hours away, it was snowing severely, and the roads would have been terrible in the dark. It was after 11 p.m., my children were 2 and 3, and the nearest hotel was quite a distance away. Not to mention the fact that my husband and I had been on the road for many hours and were quite exhausted. Believe me when I say that we really waited and that both my husband and I decided to stay the night.